Hey, Matt here. So we're going to take a look at in Reaper how to prepare some assets from a single sound file that might have different kind of takes inside it, and how to batch export those files or batch render them so that they're ready to drag straight into FMOD, and that will prepare them straight away for the engine. So to do this, we're going to need to go on to our learning materials, and you can see that I've added a folder called sound effects assets you can use, and also some test sound effects in a different folder, two different folders. Go ahead and download both of those, and you might need to use something like 7-zip to extract. If you don't have 7-zip, it's really good. It's totally free, and you can use this to extract zip files. So I'm going to go into the sound effects assets folder, and you can see that I've shared a lot of different sounds, some ambient jungle sounds, some tropical sounds, a lot of creature sounds of different sizes, which are all useful. A lot of Ellen sounds like human breath, different types of sort of gasps and all that, because there is combat, so we do need to kind of maybe think about that in the future. And various whoosh and impact kind of combat sounds, and some magic sounds as well. But yeah, I just want to show you the basics of how you might go about processing some sounds in Reaper so that you can get everything in the game as you need to. So let's have a look. There should be some footstep sounds in here somewhere. Here we go. I'm just going to choose a couple of these. I mean, there's nothing stopping me from just shift clicking all of them, and I could drag them into Reaper, and Reaper will ask me if you want them on one track or multiple tracks. Because these are all footsteps, I could just put them all on one track, and then I can perhaps bring in some other stuff and put it on a different track if I like, or whatever I want to do. So I'm just going to grab these leather boots, and I'm going to put them on a single track but a different track, and I'll maybe just move them out of the way for now. So this is kind of a very basic kind of a task that we have in Reaper, is to go through these sounds. Let's say I'm not going to go through them in any detail with you, but export them so that we get, let's say, whatever, 20 different footsteps into FMOD as individual files, each one probably about, that kind of length, into FMOD, because this is no good to us in FMOD. This is one big take with loads of takes in that, and it's not going to be any use. And there's different ways to do this, of course. If we just have a quick recap on what we were doing before, we could, for example, line it up to the start of the grid line, and then we can kind of make a selection on the grid. It's a bit fiddly because I'm not able to get that really close to the start without doing something like holding Alt, and then it goes into slip mode, and I could kind of slip it across like that, and then I could maybe click here and press S, and then do that again and hold Alt and kind of slip that across. So there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, it works, and that's fine. S again. It's actually, I would say, good practice to line things up to the start of the grid line. Just make sure you're really accurate if you're doing that, and you might want to zoom in and just make sure that's really close to the start without kind of cutting it off like that. Make sure it's nice and close to that automatic fade that Reaper puts in. And this is one way to do it. So on the top we have a footstep. It's actually kind of like a wooden sound. And on the bottom we might layer something else in with that as well, if we want to, like maybe a kind of leather sound. And this is one way to do this kind of work. Let's just highlight this region for now. That's kind of combining a wood and a leather and a grass sound, which they're two different surfaces, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But what would be nice if I was thinking more about the sound design here would be to find maybe like a dirt one. That's glass. Okay, they're nice sounds to use just for general kind of dirt. So an outdoor kind of world really would be a combination of the dirt sound and the kind of leather boot. And these are very well recorded samples, by the way. So we're getting very high quality result just because we're using good samples. So I can Alt, click and drag, and let's just hear this kind of result. That's grass, so it would be nice if we had something just leathery. But I'm kind of getting into the sound design now, and what I really want to focus on is how we can very, very quickly edit down files like this so that they're individual footsteps. And like you saw, I could do it the manual way, or I can rely on the actions that Reaper has. So we know that Reaper has actions, and I can reach them by pressing the question mark key, which is of course Shift / brings up the question mark. And there is an action here. I can probably guess what it is because obviously I have got shortcuts set up for all the stuff on my other PC, but here I don't have anything set up, just like you probably don't have shortcuts set up yet. But there is an action. So if I type, let me think. This one is called Dynamic Split, which is actually auto-assigned to D, which is quite cool. So I can press run, or I can close and I can press D, and it will give me the same result. And it's going to go through these files, and it's going to the best of its ability, it's going to cut them all up like that. And it's doing it too finely there, so the minimum slice length needs to be 200 or so, let's say, or 100 milliseconds, which is 1/10 of a second. Minimum slice length. And we can reduce the splits as well. So there's various options here for splitting this up, but it does take a bit of tweaking. There are options such as threshold, where we can sort of tell Reaper what is the minimum value for the sound. But you can see it's kind of doing something funny here. So it's because it's not set to gate opening, it's set to gate closing. So now I can double click these values and it will reset them. Now we can see it's got a green line wherever it detects the transient. But if we wanted to slice at the start, we can deselect that. And it should move to the start. It hasn't done it there, but it might be because the threshold isn't low enough. So if I lower the threshold, there we go. And that's looking pretty good now. There are sometimes two slices, so I can increase the minimum slice length to, let's say, 200 milliseconds. That should disappear. Minimum slice length. And then there's a few places where it's not quite. I could try reducing the splits now, and it will reduce the number of splits. I could even set the number of splits that I want here. So there we go. Now, arguably, that took a bit of time to get that result. But once you set that, it tends to remember, and it's pretty fast then the next time you do that. So now, it's pretty much split all of these into individual sounds, and because I still have snap on, it's actually quite nice and easy to just drag them out. So that's kind of the faster way, but whether or not you use that method is down to you. and your particular workflow, sometimes if you put in a bit of kind of practice at something, you end up getting faster, and then you kind of always rely on that faster method, and it becomes your kind of your go-to way. So that's what I would recommend, just spending like a bit of time doing that, because it does save you a lot of time when it comes to splitting up large files. Okay, so let's just say that we have an acceptable number of footsteps. Let's say at minimum eight footsteps, because we don't want to be hearing the same footstep triggering again and again in FMOD. So, okay, let's just say that's enough for now. What we need to do is get all these. Oh, I'm just noticing we're seeing a bit of the kind of next footstep come in. So what's important to do is just kind of make sure that doesn't happen. Kind of keep your eyes peeled. And there's some really nice shortcuts with Reaper. If we try and trim with them all selected, nothing happens. But if we hold, I think we have to hold Control and Alt for this one. Control and Alt will trim them all in together. And we could even Control click on the fade shape and it will change them all together. So that's just good to make sure that our sounds are nice and clean, they're ending cleanly. And these should all be fairly clean now. Yeah, not too long, not too short, because if you have them too short, you'll end up sort of choking off the sound and it kind of sounds a bit weird. But actually that's fine. Too short in this case would be even shorter. So that's a bit too short. So yeah, just get that feel right, and we're now ready to export these. So what we can do is select all items. Now don't select 2 rows with this next tip if you have multiple rows going on. Just select, let's say, the longer row. These are now a bit longer than the top row, because we're going to use an action that is regions from items. And I just kind of guessed it there by typing in regions and item. And the action is insert separate regions for each selected item. And this is a really important shortcut. So you can actually assign this to a key, because you'll be using this pretty much all the time. For regions, I'll press OK. That's actually mapped to something else, but this is a more important shortcut. So I'm going to map it to this key in this case. And I can run it from here, or I can close it and press the key, but I'll just run it from here. And you'll see that it's made a region for every kind of sound that we have here. And if I had them both selected, like that and then done that, you actually get 2 regions at the top, so you don't want that. So that's why I only selected just the bottom. Okay, so that's really good, because it saves me time, and we have nice clean sounds here. Whether or not we've cut them up manually or we've done it the dynamic split way, it doesn't matter. But I think this shortcut, I think, is pretty essential if you're going to be preparing. Well, you will be preparing assets for games, so do familiarize yourself with this one. Regions for each selected item. It's a good one, and that's pretty much all we need from Reaper. So we can go and render now, because that's Reaper's word for exporting, rendering to file. It is baking or rendering these as individual files, and there's a few things we can do here to make that really easy, and then we can then save it as a preset as well. So bounds is the bit of the timeline that Reaper exports, and we want to set that to we can set it to all regions in the project or selected regions. I like to set it to selected regions so that I can just jump into the region manager here, and I can make sure that I'm only exporting certain regions. And you can see that in this region manager box, if I select a region, it's going to select it on the timeline there. So it will take the name of the asset and it will make it the region name. But if we want to, we can rename this. We could say, like, Ellie, who's our character, foot. I mean, there's only one character that has feet, really. I mean, the creatures have feet as well, I suppose. But yeah, we could stick to something sensible like feet underscore Ellie underscore dirt. And that is a sensible file name. And that's important because that name will carry across into FMOD. And FMOD will actually give the event a separate name, but we still want to be able to look in FMOD and kind of understand generally what the source file was called. So I'm just going to rename that by doing that. There is a better way to do that, but don't have to go into that, it's too much. And make sure these are selected, and then it says close 9 regions up here, ready to export. And we haven't told it where, but we should point that to the audio directory that we're working from on our external hard drives or on our local drives, which we'll copy and back up to our external hard drives, or GitHub, and GitHub. The file name, I want to just make sure that the file name is going to be the regions. And to do that, I go into the wildcards and say project region. And the $sign is like a wildcard sign. So that means it's going to use the regions as a wildcard. In other words, it's just going to use the region name. And we can see what it's going to call all the files there. Perfect. We don't need to worry too much about mono or stereo. But because these are 3D sounds and it's quite a small sound in space in the game, mono makes sense. And it just means we're saving a bit of CPU basically. But if you're not sure, you can just leave it stereo. It doesn't really matter. And it's going to export as a WAV at 44. That's all quite sensible. And we can actually save this as a preset, so we don't have to do this every time. You can see, you can just name it by your name or whatever. So there we go. And every new project you start in Reaper, you can then force it to your preset, because it only remembers the settings per Reaper project, and I haven't even saved this project yet. On the topic of saving projects, it's no harm in me saying again that you have to click this button when you're saving as. You have to save as, and then click this button here when you're saving projects. Otherwise, it's not going to include or copy all media into the project directory, which means if you clean your download folder, or the computer that you're on automatically cleans itself, all the audio in your project will disappear and it won't be there the next time you open that Reaper project. So when you click this one, what it will do is it will gather all the audio and it will put it in a folder called media files wherever you're saving the actual project. So the media files folder will hold all of the sound assets, even if you've removed them from the download folder where you initially downloaded them from. They'll be in this media files folder. Okay, so yeah, that just about covers that stuff. I didn't actually export them there though, did I? So if I bring up this export window again, you can see it's forgotten the settings. So I'll go preset, all settings, MMG, and then boom, it goes regions, wildcard name region, and it's set to mono, and it will remember where you tell it to export as well. Cool. So that's a bit more about Reaper in terms of how to batch export using actions, and if you wanted to, it's kind of that auto remove silence option as well, but that's a bit of a cherry on the top of the cake. It is worth playing around with, I would say, but if you're happy to do it manually, that's fine. Just make sure that your regions are nice and tidy, they sound good. Usually I like to set up a loop, just make sure it sounds good, and then I can double click the region inside, or double click the actual region name, and it will highlight that, and then it will loop as long as you've got your loop button selected down there. So that's it really. You don't need to know a huge amount more than that in Reaper. Just remember that everything that you layer up together is baked together in FMOD, so it's just going to be one footstep in FMOD. So if we have a situation where we want to, let's say, have our let's say gravel footsteps, and then we want to introduce maybe armor sound or something like that. If our character can pick up or drop armor, that's actually better done in FMOD, because FMOD is a triggering solution that can allow us to bring in different sounds and remove them as stuff happens in the game. Whereas in Reaper, it's just about preparing those basic assets. So anytime we have something that may change in the game, like armor coming or going, then we need to make separate sounds for the armor, so that we can, in FMOD, have one track for the dirt footsteps and another one for the armor after we do the armor footsteps, and we can actually blend them together in FMOD because the game is changing. So remember that Reaper, being like a DAW like Pro Tools, Ableton, Fruity Loops, or any music making software, is really for preparing the assets, and FMOD is going to dictate how those assets are actually triggering in our game, and we can do that in real time, and I'll have a look at that in the other video.